Focus on the Masters is a non-profit arts education program documenting many of the artists who live in Ventura County. One of these programs is the Spotlight series, videotaped interviews hosted by founder Donna Granata.
It gives me great pleasure to welcome Elisse Pogofsky Harris.
Two of the subjects of Spotlight are the printmaker and painter Elisse Pogofsky Harris and her husband, the actor-photographer Robert Brown.
And at the table before the toast, I said, "May I ask, Miss Pogofsky, for your daughter's hand in marriage?" And the mother had a napkin on her lap and said, "Take her foot too!"
This Ojai couple have been together since the late 70s. They spend a portion of each year in Italy, living for many years in this farmhouse in Tuscany and, more recently, at their elegant home in Todi, Umbria. Elise was first drawn to Italy in her early 20s.
Well, I first took a trip to Rome in 1964, and I really fell in love with Italy, especially Florence at that time. When I first arrived on the train and a friend picked me up and took me to the Piazzale Michelangelo, which is in the top of Florence, and you look out over the city and you can see the Giotto Bell Tower and the Piazza Signoria, and it just was so thrilling, and I felt as though it was home. It was a very interesting feeling. It didn't feel strange at all to me. It was just wonderful. The 60s and early 70s in Rome was an especially rich and wonderful time. There were many jazz musicians, many classical musicians who came just to work. Lots of painters and many sculptors, especially sculptors who were doing bronze casting at that time because it wasn't as available in the States as it is now.
One of these sculptors was Paul Sutman. The model is Elise, who was married to Paul.
I married a sculptor who had a grant to the American Academy in Rome, and fortunately, at that time, they gave long grants to artists, and sculptors could have a 3-year grant, which is unheard of now. So they gave me a lovely studio to work in, and that studio had an etching press. So I started to make etchings in Rome. I did mostly aquatint, a way of developing tonal qualities. It seemed like there were a lot of old people in Rome. I did many etchings using the elderly, and especially in a kind of waiting mode.
What were they waiting for?
I don't know.
You don't know?
What one would hesitate to say they probably were waiting to die. This instead is not someone waiting to die. It's called Afternoon of the Espionage Agent. He was a spy, an English spy, whose name I can't remember.
It's probably better that you self-destruct instantly
Right.
if you told us his name.
Right. This is called Ladies in Waiting. I lived on a very interesting street in Rome called the Via delle Mantellate, the mantled ones. And it was across from the prison, the Regina Coeli prison in Rome. And this was a scene looking through the doorway one day with this group of people waiting to go in and see the prisoners. It was a pretty crazy area. This is called Me as a Piero della Francesca, a self-portrait, obviously.
And the reference to the historic artist, Piero della Francesca, of course you were surrounded by this amazing history.
Oh, yes.
Oh, and how did that help you develop as an artist?
Well, everywhere you went, you saw art, and beautiful art, and wonderful things, and people who were interested in art, and you just became totally immersed in it. It became your total life. Everything was about painting and sculpture and just a wonderful aesthetic.
A decade before Elise first lived in Italy, Robert was working as an actor on Broadway. He became interested in photography, encouraged by his friends, the photographers Alan and Deanne Arbus. Deanne was to offer Robert some advice concerning his new avocation.
I did a film in Spain in 1957 or something in there. And I bought a camera and took photographs She saw them, and she said when you have the camera, you have to make it invisible. So the person you're talking to or in front of doesn't see a camera. It's your presence or something you're doing. And that's not the point of being there for the picture. The fact is the fact, but for them, not just they'll relax, but you can open up yourself and themselves to the moment.
Right.
And it's the moment you capture, and you'll see what the light is. You'll wait for that, and you'll learn things about light.
In the 60s and 70s, Robert had become a successful television actor, but he continued to be interested in photography, and Italy was to provide him a wealth of subject matter.
I like to capture the moment, you know, and there's a moment of a man looking out the window, observing, and I was observing him observing. Here was two men deep in a conversation, and I disappeared behind the camera as Deanne advised me to do, and they didn't even know I was right smack in front of them. But I had been there long enough for them to keep doing what they were doing, and waited for the camera to go cook, and that's the magic of photography, like that, just when you hit the switch.
And are you going digital completely?
Oh yes, of course I did the other for some years, but I wasn't as skilled as like Alan and all these people who know what the camera does, film does, and I was happy to learn how to use that digital camera and the printers and make my own printings and things that like these are.
Well, one of the last things we want to talk about is the changes in Rome. We have photographs of a lot of the graffiti. That's really hit you, and you're documenting it. These ancient sites covered in graffiti.
It symbolizes the wreck of our yesterday's life, aesthetics, not just in architecture as it is in Great Rome, and churches and things sprayed and and nobody seems to be shooting those people for doing it. But it's our culture that's fallen. I mean, it's the tattoos and the women wear and the men and the clothing and the people dressing down. They wear torn things at their knees and they sell that as as if it's old, but that's our society going rapidly.
Well,
Robert may view tattoos and graffiti as a defiling of bodies and buildings, but in his work, he is an affectionate observer. He has an actor's eye, creating theatre from the mundane and reflecting empathy for humanity, engendering trust in his subjects and acting as a conduit for creative expression. In a similar way, Italy has become a creative vehicle for both Robert and Elise, propelling them forward on their individual artistic explorations. The same subject matter viewed through very different eyes to create work that, like themselves, is distinct but related.